on such a beautiful warm evening. And we're going to start off tonight with the Summer Acceleration Camp. Jared.
I'm actually going to hand it over to Mr. Vukovic he stole the first item of our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner. Madam Vice President, at tonight's meeting, we are asking you to authorize us to post and advertise an interview for up to 30 teachers for this year's summer program. Now, as you know, last year the board approved our use of ESSER funds for the summer program. We included it for this year as well. We would just like to start the process to go out and start the interview and advertising process. As you know, we had a nice compilation of both in-house, but a lot of external staff anyway. So we'd like to get that clock started and get that clock moving. So we're seeking permission tonight to post like we did similar to last year.
30.
Yes, ma'am. Now, we may not need that many. It's going to depend on how many we have enrolled in the program. And we're going to discuss the framework at next week's academic committee meeting. But for right now, we'd at least like to start the process of trying to recruit staff.
Do you still feel your budget will be roughly in line with last year?
We do. We came in under budget last year. We feel we're fine exactly where we're at. We may know additional changes. We do have it authorized for this summer, and I believe next summer as well. After that, the board's going to make decisions if we want to continue. But through the use of ESSER funds, we are ready to go for the summer.
Okay. Any questions? So when you say, wait, so you say you're seeking the board approval. This isn't a.
For this
Yeah, you have a motion later this evening. Yep. On the regular agenda. On the regular agenda, there's a motion that we just like to.
Under audit. Under audit and finance. Oh, this is the one you're.
I don't believe it's under audit and
It's
finance.
under, I think it's under personnel.
Okay. Very good.
These are actually on
6.4,
finance. Yeah, so it's,
6.4, I believe.
Yep.
Okay. Very good.
Yep.
2022-23 food service budget. Jared, you're up.
Yes, ma'am. As we do every single year, the board approves a food service budget, which then is submitted to PDE for approval. We work very closely with Chartwells, who is our food service management company, to put this budget together. There is a link on the agenda here. There are copies that everybody sees as well of the proposed budget, kind of a summary detail. It doesn't go into employee detail or anything, but it's basically a summary of what the proposed budget for next year looks like. Now, the past 2 years, we have been able to, through a USDA waiver, offer free meals to all students, regardless of their paid reduced status. All meals have been free to both breakfast and lunch have been free to all students. Now, as of right now, that waiver is going away. So for the 22-23 year, we are planning to be back to a kind of a pre-COVID, I guess, system of operating food service where you have free, reduced, and paid students. I can tell you there's a lot of push, a lot of kind of advocacy out there for this to be continued. Basically, there just needs to be in some type of federal law passed wording that allows the USDA to approve another waiver for school districts to offer it. It wasn't included in the last bill that just recently passed, but there's continued push to try and include it. But as of right now, the district needs to move forward as though that is not going to happen for next year, that we will return to free, reduced, and paid status for all students for next year. And that's what this budget is based on, that we're back to normal. If we do go back to a status where all students are free, this budget can certainly change. But by the end of the month, by the middle of April, we do have to have something submitted to PDE, which means it's probably going to be prior to any decision that might be made to extend those waivers.
So I can see your projected profits pretty skinny. So you're thinking the 10 cents is what you're.
It is that small margin there, the roughly $5,000 includes those small price increases. And as we all know, as consumers, even outside of food service program, prices for food have drastically increased. And we don't see that coming down anytime soon. And that is really, I think, the main driver for the need for some type of price increase, even just to hope to break even. And the projected numbers for participation in here, as they are just projections, really do go back to even it would be the 18-19 school year, because certainly we've seen some increase in participation the past 2 years, with all meals being free. We don't expect that to continue. If we do go back to the old, I want to say pre-COVID pay status, so we did kind of reduce those numbers down. We certainly hope that maybe we continue, kids have gotten used to eating in the cafeteria. Maybe they will still continue, but that's hard to tell this first year after the waiver leaving. So
Is the waiver good to the end of this school year, June of 2022 then?
it is good to our last day of school, which I believe is June 4th.
Okay. And then this would all be, what you're talking about is all for next school year.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with this school year.
Yep. What we are going to do is part of this possible change, because we have certainly seen, because all meals were free, we've seen a huge decrease in just the free and reduced applications that we've gotten, because that's no fault of anybody's. Parents just didn't fill it out because they didn't need to. So what we are going to try and do here in the next month is kind of push please fill out your application, because in a normal year, that application status gets you through the first couple of weeks of August and the whole month of September. So we don't want parents to come back next year and have to, start racking up charges on their kids' accounts if they don't have to. So here in the next month, we're kind of going to do a push out to parents and social media and everything to say, hey, please fill out the application. It'll get you to the beginning of next year until the end of September. We will be sending out new applications after July 1st, but this will at least get you a status that gives you a little bit of a buffer into the next school year, because as a district, what we don't want to see is our negative balances see a huge increase because parents are coming back and they didn't need to.
And Madam Vice President, if it's okay with you, we invited Congressman Thompson, as well as the new Congressman Reschenthaler, I believe the name is, who represent this area, to our Advocacy Day on April 8th, that we can bring our concerns and voice our concerns to them as well.
April 8th.
It's at PSB Advocacy Day we're hosting at the high school. It's usually just local state reps, but we invited some federal congressmen, only because of the
When
waiver.
Are we invited? The board?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, my schedule
Yep.
for April. So what time does that start?
10 a.m.
Okay, at the high school. Okay. Jared, what's SSO stand for? You have just actual revenues include on the first page up at the top, to include SSO reimbursements.
SSO is seamless summer option. That's currently the operation that we're running under. It's typically meant for just summer program. If you do run a summer program, that's the program you run under once the normal National School Lunch Program ends your last day of school. Currently, there is no SSO. I mean, that's just a header. If you do run SSO, you should be including that in your budget, but that is not included in here because we currently would not run it during the summer.
Okay.
Julia, I think Terry has his hand up.
Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is we have provided meals in the summertime, I think the last 2 summers. Are we going to do that? And we provided those free the last couple summers, right?
The first summer after COVID, we did. We continued to offer meals all summer. Last summer, the only summer meals we offered was during our summer camp. There are multiple providers throughout Indiana community that do offer, they participate, they have as much of an opportunity to participate in SSO as we do. So as not to duplicate their services, because a lot of them run it during summer camps and there can be some revenue for them. We do not compete with the other outside agencies that run that.
Yeah, and my question is, are we going to do that this summer? And then does that free USDA program apply for this summer past June?
When we run our summer camp this summer, we are going to apply for a separate program to allow us to offer meals, free breakfast and lunch, just to our students in our summer camp.
Okay. And then the last question is, the nickel and dime increase is shown on the agenda. Percentage wise, those are lower than what I see in the news as far as food increase prices. So what happens if we start operating in the red throughout next school year?
I mean, we have a healthy balance in our food service. That would just make up that difference, and then we would evaluate the following year to see what type of increase we would need based on the results of the 22-23 school year.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have, Julia.
Jared, the reserve in the food service is a separate account, and we can only use that for food service.
Yes.
So we can use that for equipment. We can also use it for making up any bread. We can't use it for a new roof.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so we have some ability if we do run in the red to make that up out of cash on hand.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, this year we're looking to end the year with a very good positive balance, mainly because the current program SSO that we're running under, the reimbursement rates are a lot higher than the normal national school lunch program. And as a district, and I give our credit to our food service department, especially Eleanor Bland, who runs it, has seen huge increases in breakfast participation, lunch participation. I mean, the junior high alone is on a normal day doing 600 plus meals a day. That includes both Eisenhower and the junior high. Since we've gone back to one cafeteria at the high school, they're putting out over 500 meals a day. It's just, a huge increase in our participation as a district, which is a good thing. But with that higher reimbursement on top of that, we are going to have a very successful year, which could be used if we do go into the red for some reason.
We haven't raised these prices for a number of years.
I would say probably 5 or 6 years we have not increased.
And we got, as I recall, we got in trouble because our prices were so low at one point.
The feds don't want you to be running a profit every single year and then raising prices. But they also don't want to see your paid lunch prices significantly below what they are reimbursing you for a free meal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's what you need to worry about. And if it gets too far off, then they can come back and say, you have to increase your price.
What's the reserve right now? What's in the reserve?
At the end of last year, it was right around, I think, $125,000.
And you haven't eaten into
I
that.
thought it was like 70.
No, and we were going to add to that at the end of this year. I can't tell you exactly what it will be because we haven't closed
Are
out.
you going to need any new equipment or anything?
I think we may need tables. We're going to look at some things, correct, Joe?
Yeah, we're going to look at some equipment. I think when we go to redo Eisenhower's kitchen, if we still have a significant balance, we could use some of that money. And I need to verify that with PDE, but my thought is to use possibly some of that money to help fund new equipment or other things that we may need for that cafeteria. So.
Yeah, I just think you're running awful thin here at $550 to $200. So, I'm not suggesting we raise the prices anymore, but if you get in a little bit of trouble, and I know we have a cushion, but can you go in mid-year and raise prices if you had to?
I'm not sure about that. I could look into that.
I would kind of doubt it, but so you feel so you've got, I don't think it's an outlandish increase.
No, and this is going back to 18-19 participation rates. With our increase in participation this year, even if we do go back, I fully expect some of that participation to stay. I mean, and we'll see something fall possibly. But even prior to COVID, we were working hard. Again, Eleanor Bland, our food service director, and the whole team, just ways to reach out to kids. We had moved breakfast at the high school down to the upper commons area, which saw we're seeing huge increases in breakfast participation there. We're doing good things as a district to keep that participation up, and I don't expect a huge decrease, which this doesn't project a huge decrease, but it does project a decrease just to be safe. So,
Okay.
and Eleanor always does an excellent job
She
of
does.
exceeding our expectations.
Yeah.
So I have a question, a request, and a comment. Question is, because of the free lunches and everything for the past 2 years, do we have any accounts that are overdue in arrears? Or was that all taken away by the generous donation of somebody a couple years ago?
We currently have nobody with negative, and when I say nobody, sometimes kids will accidentally charge something, and the food service staff knows that they're not supposed to do that. We have a couple who maybe are 10, 15 cents here or there,
Okay.
but the major ones have all been taken care of by generous donations. Even prior to COVID, we had a balance of donations that we could have applied, and they all have since gone away. So
Okay.
that's one of the reasons for trying to get free and reduced applications out there as soon as possible.
Okay, and then my request comes about the free and reduced applications. And however you reach out, can you make it crystal clear that that information is completely and totally confidential? Because I know of people that need it and they just won't, they won't do it because they're just so afraid that, people are going to find out. So if you can try that.
Mhm.
And then my comment is, the increase in participation in the lunches now that everything's free kind of makes me think about the food security questions on the PACE survey. And that I was surprised how many children are feeling that they've got insecure, feelings about their food supply. So I'm really glad that we're able to do that for them. And I hope we can continue to kind of help them out that way.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? Terry, anything else? Okay, so the motion tonight is the motion is strictly to increase the prices by such and such an amount, and you have that on the.
Yeah, there's a motion to basically set the prices. 8.4 is that motion, and then 8.5, once the prices have been set, is to approve the budget.
Budget itself, right? Okay.
Yes, so that I can
Yeah.
submit that to PD.
Okay, I'd like you to, we'll call on you to give a mini report of what you just gave us about, just the highlights.
Yep.
Because I think people will want to know. Okay, so we can move along and we can go to 2021 real estate liens, Jared.
Yes, we, a couple weeks ago, got our final report back from the county. After the last December collection, the tax collectors then report to the county any uncollected real estate taxes at that point, at which it is then becomes the responsibility of the county to collect. We get the information as to what taxes are uncollected as of December 31st, and then the board routinely every year votes to approve those liens as required. This year's amount, which I'm happy to report, is significantly down from the prior year. The 21-22 total liens are $930,174, which is one of our smallest amounts since 2002-2003.
Are you beating people with a stick?
I wouldn't do that, man. But as a percentage, and we can look at the amounts, but certainly taxes have changed in that time period. But as a percent, that 3.2 is also about the total taxes issued is one of the smallest percentage amounts of taxes as well. So that that is
Well, it
accountable
suggests
to the
maybe we're not
taxpayers of
charging
this
enough
district.
if your delinquency gets too low. I would say if it goes under 2.5%, then we better start charging more. But I just.
So there is a motion on the agenda tonight. I believe it's 8.3 that breaks out between the municipalities, each of those liens, and seeking board approval for that.
Okay, I have something that I just found out last week. Indiana Borough. Now, I don't know if this is across the street, but I was startled. And I said to the person I was representing, go find your original tax notice because we're not paying the $10. Evidently in Indiana Borough, I could be wrong, so if they're listening, if you don't have your original tax notice with the amount due on it, and you walk in and just say, I want to pay my taxes, they charge you an extra $10 because you don't have and you're supposed to send it in when you pay them. I think you ought to check on that and find out why they're doing that. Because if you get it right and you put your assessment number on the check, what's the big deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not aware.
I'd like to get this. And I'd like to know if White Township is doing the same thing. I just didn't know that was happening. But I've never had a situation where I didn't have a tax notice until recently.
Terry has his
I
hand.
didn't know.
Terry?
Yeah, are the number of liens on are the number of properties that have liens, are they also decreasing?
They are, sir. I can't tell you by how much. I don't have that information in front of me, but the number of properties that account for those liens is down as well.
I'd like to know sometime how many households that constitutes.
You know, one of the interesting things I noticed in looking at this is in the very first year, 2001, 2002 was 998,000. Get up around 1.1, back down to 1 million, back up to 1.1, 1.2, back down to 930,000. It seems like it's pretty consistent at about $1 million a year, even though the percentage is dropping. The whole number of amount of tax owed has remained relatively stable.
That $1 million that also isn't, that's the total lien. That isn't just our portion of the lien.
Oh, you think? No, that can't be
Yeah,
right.
yeah, they're not gonna separate out the liens.
Can't-
lien's a
Sure
lien.
they would, Spring versus, they'd have to by
No, it's a
law.
lien.
That's the district's responsibility. That's the district share.
Is that $1 million all district money, or
Yes.
is that a half district money?
Oh, I
That'd
thought-
be our share
That's
of
their
the,
share.
it's not if you didn't pay your county and municipal taxes, that's not
I
included
don't
in
think
that
we'd be
number.
allowed to include that in our number. I think that would be
Well,
something.
my point
I don't
is
know.
that
I don't know.
I find it interesting that the percentage has dropped, the numbers of properties dropped, the number of people have dropped, but yet the amount has remained relatively stable over the last 20 years. Is there any gut feeling, Jared, as to why that? Because I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I mean, certainly the overall tax amount that would have been issued back in 2001, 2002 would have been a lower amount, so that would have been a higher. But why the overall amount is
The whole
really
dollar-
within a couple $100,000.
But yeah, the whole dollar amounts stayed relatively stable after the entire 20 years.
I don't know. I
That's
can't
why-
say that it's the same tax.
That's why I asked that question, Walter. There's something not like rhyming here.
It's not in harmony.
Well, I'm glad it's falling as a percentage. That's a good thing. But it's still just an anomaly, I think, that it's remained relatively stable over a 20-year period of time.
There's certainly a lower number of taxpayers paying into the system, isn't there? Because we've lost population, at least in the borough, since particularly during the Great Recession.
Yeah, but their
Exactly.
property still would have been taxed. I mean, even somebody would own that property and have to pay taxes on it.
I'm not sure that we've actually lost population. I know the
Well, the
countywide,
census says we
the
did.
countywide has,
Yeah.
but has Indiana,
I thought
in White
that I had
Township, I
read
don't
that
think
it is. Okay, well,
Well,
I
anyway,
don't
it's just curious that amount's remained relatively stable, that's all.
okay, any other questions? We'll learn more about that, but if you let me know about that
For
10
Indiana
bucks.
Borough, White
Yeah,
Township.
I can reach out
They
to
both went down today.
the tax collector.
Because there's still a lot of people that walk into their offices and pay these taxes rather than pay them by mail.
Jared, while you're checking on that, what's the status of the White Township taxes being due a month ahead of time for a discount?
It shouldn't be a
As-
month
as
ahead of
opposed-
time. It should be within a couple days.
No, but it was like a month ahead of time, as opposed to Indiana boroughs being due for a discount a month later.
I did have a conversation with the tax office on that, and the district certainly has the right to set those dates, but if the district doesn't, then the tax collectors can set their individual dates within a range. That's why I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it is a month.
It was 3 to 4 weeks.
I didn't see that. But we can, as part of our budget adoption this year, actually set those dates if we want to, where, the discount is due by this date, base is this time period, and penalty is a time period. So we have every right to do that.
I just think it should be uniform for everybody paying school taxes in our district. It shouldn't be that some of them have to pay earlier in order to get the discount. It just seems like April 15th should be April 15th.
Yeah, I mean, we set the percentage of the discount and the penalties, and we, as part of that, we can also set the dates by which those periods are, so.
Okay.
Alrighty, then, the ESSERS, the budget update and the budget projections and the ESSER funding review, please.
Yes, ma'am. Everybody should have a copy of the handout, but it's also attached again to the agenda. This is our updated budget projection, typical form that we see as part that we've seen in the past. What is new about this one and updated is there is an estimated column for where at this point I think we will end the 21-22 school year. Because of our time tonight, and what I'd like to do is maybe in April, at the April Buildings and Grounds, really kind of delve into great detail in the budget. I am in the process of preparing a budget packet that we really haven't seen for the past year or two because of COVID and not really meeting in person. But I'd like to really kind of cover that at the next meeting. Because the board will be asked then at the first meeting in May to approve a tentative budget, which will be submitted to PD. So tonight, I'll just kind of, if you're okay with it, Madam Vice President, just kind of go generally through some
Yeah,
of these.
when's our next, what meeting? You're talking about the next Buildings and Grounds meeting. When's that?
The audit and finance,
Which would be the end of next.
the end of April.
Well, the problem is that if we have a real busy executive session agenda and so maybe we ought to just not have the meeting on May, just a suggestion, and do a budget workshop on a night when we don't have to be done in 40 minutes, an hour, whatever.
We
it
can
is.
start, yeah, it's up to the discretion of the committee.
Well, I mean, I think we gotta get our hands around this because we have a lot of things we're thinking about right now, including where Terry's gonna be with his committee on this school project.
So Jared, a question that I had. I know we've basically asked for figure on a no tax increases, the premise for the budget, and then if we need to, we'll consider something after that. But are there not some restrictions as to how big your fund balance can be that limits what your tax increase can be?
There is, yes. If your fund balance is over 8% of your budgeted expenditures, then you cannot raise taxes. So let's say, right now we're projected at an ending fund balance of 8.6. I don't know what percentage that is of the expenditures of $59.5 million.
Well, if you figured 60 million just to be quick and dirty about it,
Yeah.
8% times 60 is 4.8 million. So am I correct in assuming that if we were to want to raise the taxes, we would have to take the fund balance down below or down to 6 or 4.8 million by moving that funds into the building fund or some other dedicated fund? Is that correct?
You would have to do something with it. You could either move it out and put it into capital reserve to pay for projects, or you could, right now you have committed fund balance of 750. That doesn't count towards that calculation. So you could commit additional fund balance for future projects to transfer later if you needed to, which would allow you to raise taxes if you so choose to do that.
So you're just putting in 750 as just your number.
Well, then that's what the board voted years ago to commit, and it's been committed for multiple years.
And that was to cover the PESER's increase, I think.
Or possible healthcare increases. So
say that again, you can't.
that number doesn't count towards that 8% limit. So
Is that 750 in the $8 million limit right now?
it is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, your unassigned fund balance projected at the end of this year is the 7.8.
So we could move 3 or 4 million into capital and be under the 8%.
The only thing you can't do is when you transfer that, it's considered an expense in your budget. So Right now I'm estimating expenditures at 56.8 million. Our budget last year was 58.3. So you really only have a window of about 1.5 that you could transfer, because you can't go over budget, even if you're just transferring money, because at the end of the day, it's considered an expenditure.
Okay, so we can move about 1.5 million into the capital at this point.
You could, and you could next year, you could
We could,
budget $1 million expenditure, which increases, your overall budget, which can affect that percentage of fund balance.
so we could put 2 or 3 million in for next year
But-
to transfer.
The point I'm trying to make is that before we would even consider a tax increase, we would have to do something with the surplus as driven by that 8% rule.
Yeah, we can,
Okay.
budget money to transfer next year. We could put in extra expenditures this year if you wanted to transfer money, that would lower that percentage.
You have to spend it this year, though. If you put it in this year, or
No.
spend it next,
No, just goes in the
Yeah,
capital.
just-
once you
account.
transfer it to capital reserve, it can sit there as
they
long
let
as.
you do that. They say, that's interesting.
It's kind of silly, isn't it?
In a way it is, Tom.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like an accounting shell game.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're gonna put the P here and we're just gonna move it around and then you're to figure out where the P goes.
And it's honestly, even with the committed fund
Figuratively or
balance,
literally.
the board could commit, $5 million to capital projects or to, Eisenhower project. It's committed on there, comes off that percentage. You could vote to do that tomorrow, and it comes off that percentage calculation. And then July 1st, you pass your budget and you uncommit it. You make a vote to uncommit it, and it doesn't matter. So it is, like you said, sir, kind of a shell game of terminology,
Vote to
where the money
uncommit.
sits, those type of things. So
After the transfer's made?
Not after the transfer is made, but the
Next budget.
commitment to move it, though you don't move it. Again,
Oh,
it's
that's yeah, okay. There's another, yes, all right, I get it now. Okay, yeah. Well, wasn't that just the,
Accountants.
I know. Well, I'll tell you, they're a funny bunch. Well, we must think about that, because clearly,
I
Mary's-
definitely.
you guys are gonna have these budget numbers up here pretty soon on these building improvements.
Yeah, I definitely feel that there is, as we have done in the past couple of years, there's going to be room if the board chooses to transfer money from the general fund into capital reserve to help with, the list of capital
No, I-
projects we have.
The last several years and this year, this really isn't a discussion we need to have if we elect not to raise the taxes.
Yes,
So
it only affects.
if the recommendation from the committee or the board is to raise the taxes, even a very small amount, then we have to do some sort of accounting gyration here to make that work.
Well,
That's the point I'm
how
trying to
dead on are you on that 56,834 in expenditures?
I would say, it's certainly
What's your
conservative.
margin of it? How conservative?
I hope it comes in, expenditures come in even less than that. We still have 3 months of the year to go.
Julie, I can tell you how conservative it is. If you take the estimated 1.57 million and cut that in half, that's how much he's doing the overestimating the expenditures and how much he's underestimating the revenues.
And that number,
Is
that
it
number
that
could
simple,
change,
Jared?
because even,
Is that how you do it?
he over exaggerates a little
I've
bit.
never seen him get red like that. Look at that.
Our revenues are
It's the
coming
sausage
strong,
makes.
still coming in very strong. EIT, despite COVID, has continued to grow, and is still going strong this year. Real estate transfer tax
Yeah,
is,
transfers are moving again. There's no question. The market's moving.
our properties, it hasn't been a major property that's sold.
Big
It sometimes
prices.
can really infuse that budget. It's just the number of properties that are selling have really helped that tax.
Terry's got his hand up again.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, to me, the question comes down to, do we want to spend this money on projects, or do we want to keep it where it's at and spend it on, other stuff? And my opinion is, we're going to need more funding to finish these projects that are in the pipeline. So again, the question I think comes down to, do we want to use some of this reserve, or are we going to possibly borrow more? And I guess to Jared, when should we make that decision? You know, do we have to make it this fiscal year before this budget's approved, or can we wait?
I mean, I think if you seriously want to have a plan to move, you know, whether it's $500,000, $1 million into capital reserve, even in the 22-23 school year, it's best to put that in the budget. Not saying that you have to transfer it. Let's say, you know, my budget projections come in and we spend way more money than we need to, and the budget, you know, you just can't afford it next year because we've had some major unexpected expenses, and we're going to use a lot of fund balance next year. Just because you budgeted maybe $1 million transfer to capital reserve doesn't mean you have to do it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I think we ought to put it as much as we feel comfortable with without messing up anything else in the budget. And then we can either decide not to move any or move a portion of that, right?
So, Tom,
This money is sitting there exactly for what we're about to do at Eisenhower and Ben Franklin and in the district. Okay, it's unconscionable that we would keep $8 million in cash in a bank account at 1% or 0.5% when we're about to spend $10 or $12 million. So I would certainly advocate tonight that we budget $5 million to move over. We don't have to move it all, but we're going to be spending that kind of money. There's no reason to borrow this money if we have it sitting in the bank.
wait.
And
You're
so
talking big transfer here.
I'm talking a big transfer, but we have big expenses. But that would also mean that 90% of these projects we pay for in cash, which I'm all in favor of. And we don't borrow additional money if we don't have to. But there's no reason to have this kind of cash sitting in our accounts. And the
Money's
discussion
still
about
pretty
raising
cheap
taxes
right
is
I don't know. I think
silly.
we should-
I would just caution transferring that type of money these next couple of years. Is the budget deficit, even with that money in there, is fairly large.
And I understand that. Okay, but at the same time, I want to push hard to do as much of this project with cash that we have on hand as we possibly
On
can.
the other hand, if you can borrow before the Fed raises too much, you're pretty decent arbitrage. You got the collateral.
And that's why you're here. I don't know what any of that meant.
Yes, you do. You do too. All right. Okay.
So I guess the question is, do we transfer some?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to go for 6 million.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
the decision for this year can be made, as we've done the past 2 years, after the books are pretty much closed and you kind of know we have almost down to the dollar, the amount, you know, the last expenditure number, the revenue number, whether we're to the good or to the bad. We've made that decision the past couple of years in October, once the books have almost been closed, as to what we want.
And I'm good with that because we'll have a better handle on the cost of the projects, hopefully by May or June of this year.
Think. As long as you think that you can get them, because, you know, we have more problems with getting this stuff down to the, you know, arguing about every little detail. So, but I think, what do you think, Walter? You think that,
Well,
what his idea?
First of all, I think Jared said that we've only got approximately $1.5 million because of the budget constraints and not going over the budget that we can possibly do for this year. But as he mentioned, then we'll have, if we wait till August or so to actually do that, then he's had a better chance to close out the books, and we can nail it to, you know, $1,525,000, because that's how much the difference would actually be, or whatever that. And I'm just making that number up, but to illustrate the point. If this project's going to be, as we're projecting, as much as 2 years, next year at this time, while we may be deep into the construction of the project, We could still transfer some additional funding, okay? But I think that Jared's correct, that as we build the budget, we may want to put an additional $1 million or whatever that figure is that this committee decides on, so that instead of only being able to transfer $1.5 million next year, maybe we can do 2 or 3 or 4, whatever that number is, based on how we perform next year. The number I'm leaving open, Julia, okay?
Yeah, but we don't want to get.
Okay.
I mean, he's adding in a lot of numbers that I haven't seen yet. Where did he get with
But-
6 million?
But we could do $1 million this year, $2 million next year, $1 million the following year, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's $4 million.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
okay,
but that's
okay, so, and then that, I think,
it's a different.
satisfies his concern that you've not committed all of the dollars at one time, because once they go into the construction budget, you can't get them back,
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I
okay?
just thought he was talking about doing it 1 year.
So, but I think if we planned a little bit ahead to accomplish putting as much in cash, and I agree, then by building that into the budget now, that gives us some more flexibility. And if we choose not to, then it's all right.
Okay. Well, then we'll plan on probably $1 million.
Yeah, I
Like
can.
that. Cindy, do you have any comments about this?
No.
Terry, you okay with that?
Yeah, and one other quick comment. With the spreadsheet, I like driving a car out the front window instead of looking out the back window. Is there any advantage to looking, instead of looking at 4 years in a rear, only looking at 2 years in the future? Does it make any sense to even that out or to flip that? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, you want 3 years in arrears and 3 years forward.
Right.
I mean, we can certainly add as many years. I mean, we're already 2022, 23 would be 1 year in the future already. We're looking 3 years in the future and 4 years in the past with certain numbers, because 2021, 22 isn't finished. But I can put as many out there as you. That does not. Isn't a major concern to me how many years
But
the
then
committee would
the
like to see.
font gets tinier and tinier.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm not advocating adding fiscal years. I'm advocating chopping off one of the previous years and adding it to the future.
I can certainly take 2017, 18 off there and add on 25, 26.
Is that okay, Terry? Does that help you?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a lot to think about. But I think it's crucial for this committee, for the audit, not the, what's your committee? Buildings and Grounds, to push hard so that we're no later with the budget than May. So that we have an idea of where we're driving the bus here when we vote in June.
Yeah, I mean, the board needs to pass a tentative budget in May, and then a final budget, which we have scheduled for the first board meeting in June.
The only thing I'm saying is Tom brought up Ben Franklin that last time we were at, I think it was our last meeting. So I don't think we can have any surprises coming in the door about what we want. Because I thought originally in Terry's schedule, the Ben Franklin was not on there. Although we recognize that something had, obviously, we know we have to do something out there, but it may be, our time may run out in terms of all of our terms. So we're either going to put it in or out, Terry. That's not my decision, but I think it's pretty crucial that we don't add a major category in at the last minute.
Right. And we're trying not to. I think we're waiting to get something off the plate before we put that on the plate. I think we're all in support of it. It's just, we also agreed a couple years ago to only, don't spread ourselves too thin. Let's bite away at this, which we're doing. And we'll add it on once one of the other projects get off.
Well, then I do think we're going to need a budget workshop and not just try to do this in a committee meeting for this budget. Okay, so you can be prepared.
Yeah, we can have a conversation as to when you would like that to be.
Okay. Okay, then I'd like to have a robust discussion. We've got 10 minutes left on, we have the ESSER funding review, and then we got to worry about this tax deadline thing. So, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I put this together at the request of the committee. What it does is it shows, over the past couple of years through the COVID pandemic, the district has received really 3 big grants of COVID funding, which are labeled ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3, with ESSER 3 being the largest of those and the most recent at $3.5 million. But what this spreadsheet basically shows is, from the time COVID started, or really we started receiving the funding in the 2021 school year, what we as a district have been doing with that funding and what we will continue to do with it at least over the next 2 years. ESSER 3, the newest grant, is also the one that we have the most amount of time at this point to spend. We have until September 30th of 2024 to spend the ESSER 3, so you can kind of see why it is projected and spread out the
See
longest.
that date again,
9/30 of 2024.
to spend ESSER 3.
Yes, which really does take us into the 24-25 school year. But right now in the projection, we're trying to have everything spent by the end of the 23-24. But we would have a little bit of room into the next school year if we need it.
So you could use it for the summer school that summer if you had some left over, you could use it for that summer school.
We could, sir, because everything on here, all these different categories, all these different uses are really just budget figures. And as we work through and we close out years and get actual expenditure numbers, we'll be refining this, redistributing the money, and we could be pushing it out to the summer of 2024. We could do another summer school if, there's money left over to do that. But really I think one of the biggest concerns we were hearing as administration from the committee was, what's going to happen when the funding goes away? When is that going away? What things will we need to continue to fund or consider at that point once the funding goes away? And those are really kind of highlighted. I know after this was printed out, it's not as clear as I would like it, but the dark blue numbers really into the 23-24 school year are items that will need to be discussed as to whether we continue to fund those after ESSERS goes away. And a lot of those are literacy interns, which we were funding even prior to COVID, but we have switched to ESSER money for the past couple years. Psych grad assistants, speech interns, mental health workers, and then summer school is really the big items that we'll have to have consideration over the next year or two, what will continue to be funded when the ESSER funding goes away. And I can tell you, there's been a lot of push, and I've been hearing that, this money is nice and the districts are doing good things with it, but the Fed should continue to fund their share of public education. So there's a lot of advocacy happening to, probably not at these levels, but to try and continue federal funding or additional federal funding for school districts to maintain some of these programs. And we are just really now in the next month or two, starting our reporting back to the feds as to what we've been using the money for the past year, and we will continue to report back to them. So there is across the state a lot of advocacy to try and continue at least some level of additional federal funding.
In round terms, Jared, as I recall, we typically prior to the COVID would get about $1 million in federal funding total for the various different programs. Is that roughly correct?
It was roughly a little less, usually around $700,000-$800,000 between. Basically, it was title funding and access, which is reimbursement for some special ed services.
Okay, and so, especially ESSERS 2 and ESSERS 3, you're at just right at about $5 million. So that's another $2.5 million that we receive over a 2-year period, over and above the $700,000 to $800,000 we normally receive from the feds.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just wanted to make that point that it almost tripled.
Absolutely.
What we actually had been receiving from the feds prior to this ESSER's funds. And what you're saying is even though people are advocating for this, you're probably not going to see it at this level of.
No, and I think as a district, we've done a good job of spreading out that 5.7 million, so there isn't this huge cliff at the end that we have to make up. But there's certainly, we've added additional services. We've done, what our students needed, and there's going to be decisions there that need to be made as to how we're going to fund those or if we continue. But and I don't make this sound like they're easy decisions to make, but we haven't hired people as a district that we will need to furlough, do those type of things. There are a lot of services that if the board chooses not to, we just don't continue with. And that's not an easy decision, please. I'm not trying to say that, but it's easier than furloughing staff and those type of things, which we're not funding out of this money in the near future.
Terry had his hand up, Julia.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Jared. I think it's very helpful to us and the public and everybody. And then just to clarify your color scheme in that last column, the 2023-2024 column. Are we saying that there's about $600,000 worth of decisions to make? Is it like the last?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
All right.
694, yes.
Okay.
Jared, is it fair to say that we're also waiting word about whether or not we get awarded 21st Century Grant, how that can offset the summer cost? So that $694,000 bill could be cut down to $300,000. But I can't tell you with certainty because I don't know if we're going to get awarded a grant. Now, I'd have to assume we may not, but so it's hard to tell you what we will need or won't need until some other decisions are made as well. Would you agree with that, Jared?
Yeah, there's certainly, like you said, there's another grant opportunity we're looking at to help fund some of that in the future.
You might not have as many students. I mean, you had a big turnout because kids had missed so much in-person learning.
Yes, we don't know. I think we're going to have to live within our means, see what the grant allows for, and then once we know more, we can plan around that. But it's just, we wanted to give you an idea. I think I think we deserve some kudos is we put ourselves in a position that only really 2 teachers we have to come up with money for. Everything else is something we can add. Now, with the mental health workers, as the board made a decision to hire a full-time person at the high school, there could be some offset there too. So we have some ways to navigate these new waters, and I'm hopeful and I'm praying that by within 2 years from now, some of the mental health workers may not be needed as much as they are. Who knows? It's just, I can't tell you with certainty 2 years from now what can happen. Would you agree with that, Jared?
Yeah, same with summer school. I mean, certainly there was major learning loss that happened because of COVID and shutdown. And that program is very valuable, but hopefully as we get back on track, that maybe it's not as needed or to the size that we've been doing it in the near future.
Yeah,
Next couple of years.
almost 500 kids last year. It was good, but it was a little tough. There's a lot of kids coming for.
It was a tremendous
Yeah,
accomplishment.
but we would encourage certainly that you don't turn any kids away again.
Yes, sir. All the principals know that message. Yes, sir.
Did you say total ESSERS was what? Total ESSERS 5.7?
It pretty close to 5 points.
$552,491.
It's easier for me to round it.
5.7. So I do have a question,
Go
Jared.
ahead.
I added all those up. And when you add up your yearly totals and subtract them for that, it's okay if you don't do anything with the set-asides. Are the set-asides already figured in the yearly totals for those others? Because
No.
otherwise I come up $273,000 red.
No, the set-asides are separate from the 3 ESSER grants, and they are used for specific purposes. And as outlined there, we don't have any control really on what we can use them for. It has to be summer loss, after-school programs, and it's a smaller amount, and it's,
Is the set-asides are an amount of money that's controlled by the government?
yes, it's separate grants from the 3 ESSER fundings here.
Okay,
Basically, PD under ESSER 3 was allowed to, the state was granted so much money, PD was allowed to say, well, I'm going to take 10% of that, and we're going to tell districts what we as a state want them to focus on, and that is what the set-asides are for.
so
They are not included in it.
21, 22, we have the $88,000 from the state.
Yes. Yes.
And for next year, we are promised we have the $185,000?
Yes, ma'am. Well,
Okay.
we were awarded those allocations.
All right.
Ms. Cindy, we are using some of that. Jared, aren't we using some of the after-school program, pay for this after-school program, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep, yep.
it's listed.
The other thing, Ms. Cindy, that's worth noting, now this could be just a one-year wonder, but Justin and I were talking the other day, this is the first time we've seen the state now invest in social emotional learning and mental health that we haven't seen it before. Usually seen the hardening of schools rather than some preventive measures. And, the board just authorized us to write a grant through PCCD, which we did, but you see a trend now more to some of the preventive measures, which we haven't seen in the past as much. Would you agree with that, Justin?
Yeah, I do. I'd say over the last 2 years, there's been a bigger push from PCCD where it typically had been like safety related, metal detectors, very kind of like hard. And they have gone towards more of SEL, mental health, behavioral health, which is promising, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I should say. Okay. Can we move on now to our last item?
Yeah, I think
you guys.
someone already covered that when we were talking about the tax liens, about trying to have the district set those dates this year as far as the tax collection periods or tax payment
well, then
deadlines.
it just should just be, I think Cindy's right, just
Yeah.
gotta make sure they're properly coordinated.
Yeah, I can
Okay,
make that
so
part
we're
of the budget
exactly at
process.
6:31. That's probably a minute fast. It's probably actually 6:30. So I think we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is that the